You have a bit of bread. What about you? Do you want a bit of bread? Come on, that's it. That's a boy. What about you, fella? Do you want a bit of bread? Come on. Come on. One for you. One for you. There we go. 4 swamp wallaby bucks. We don't have any does at the moment because the one we did have here sadly jumped into a swimming pool. Chuff, chuff, chuff. We still have 5 chuffs, but yeah, we're missing our swamp wallaby doe. Here we see the prism framed pool. Over there on the bottom of the pool you can see swamp wallaby footprints. Now when I found the doe floating drowned in the pool, there were only a couple of little marks on the bottom, and I decided I don't want this to happen again. So I added a ladder, and it was only 3 or 4 days before all these other patches of the pool bottom became visible where the silt's been kicked out of the way, because one of those 4 buck swamp wallabies decided to follow the doe and climb up on the edge of the pool and try to drink from the pool. I have no idea why they want to drink from the pool, because I maintain water dishes, don't I, eh? I maintain water dishes. And every day I clean them and fill them. However, swamp wallabies are curious things, and for some reason 2 of them decided to jump in the pool. I imagine they climbed on the water pump and went in through here, and yeah, I found the doe swimming or lying drowned in there, and I didn't see or hear the buck, because the buck was able to figure out what a ladder is for. Oh gee, it's nice to have chuffs again. I hope they enjoy being here as much as I enjoy having them here. So, for the curious, wanting to know what I do with a dead swamp wallaby, I carried her over and I put her under a tree beside the fence where she could look out toward the north in the shade of a dead tree, and there she be. And her state of decomposition lets you see how much time has elapsed. Turns out you can't do CPR on a swamp wallaby when they drown. I was probably only 5 minutes too late to be able to rescue her, but yeah, she was dead. But the shape of their rib cage means you can't get cardiac compression going, and their mouth's the wrong shape for mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. There wasn't anything I could do. Sometimes things go on and you can't do anything about them, like all these dead leaves on the forest floor. I can't do anything about them. The trees are thirsty. They're doing what they can to stay alive. They're shutting off the leaves that they can't feed. They're hanging on to what leaves they think they can sustain, but the rest of them are just falling on the ground. On the bright side, it's adding nutrient to the soil when the leaf finally breaks down. Again, on the bright side, in the meantime, they add shade to the soil to keep the roots of the trees cool, so you can see how the trees are trying to defend themselves against the dry times by dropping their leaves they can't keep alive onto the soil over the top of their roots. But there's nothing I can do when it's too hot and too dry. And these things just die. On the not so bright side, that's going to burn really well. The stuff on the ground won't burn as well, but it still adds fuel to the fire, if you know what I mean. The shaded patches of the forest are okay. These leaves are all right. And the grass on the ground around my place, where I've been slashing and mowing and composting and sheet mulching for decades, is pretty good. But have a look at the canopy behind my hut. It's full of brown leaves from trees that are half dead. And there's nothing I can do about that. When the tree dies, it just turns into a bushfire fuel bomb. And that's why I bought the wood chipper, to reduce the amount of fuel on the forest floor, making the best of a bad thing, because sometimes you can't do much about it. Now, I have mentioned that on my neighbour's side of the fence, life's a bit worse in terms of dead trees. He's got more of them than I have. Speaking of fences, do you see me climbing over the fence? You don't see me climbing over the fence. The fence, which I have spent 36 years repairing, maintaining, standing up. Look at the edge effect. Endangered species side of the fence that's not there, sheep farm side of the fence that's not there. The fence has come to an end. Now, this doesn't mean that I've been bought out, although my neighbour probably has access to the funds. What it means is that this 150-year-old fence has reached its use-by date. Why do we say it's a 150-year-old fence? We say that because that line along there is magnetic north-south as it was in 1882. Magnetic north around here drifts towards the east, and it drifts 1/10 of a degree every 10 years. So you can basically go and have a look at a fence line and have a look at its magnetic bearing, and you can backtrack to when the fence was surveyed, because most of the surveyors used magnetic north rather than grid north back in the day. But anyway, yeah, this fence is gone. It's become firewood. And for a long time, I resisted the replacement of the fence. I put a lot of work into standing the fence up. But, you know, the law's the law. And my neighbour runs sheep and he runs cattle. And it was increasingly difficult for me to convince the sheep and the cattle to pay attention to my efforts to repair the 150-year-old fence. Now have a look at the canopy on my side, and you'll see that, yeah, I've got trees that are suffering. I've got some trees that are dead. Have a look at the canopy over here, and there's a hell of a lot more dead trees. And yeah, I've been over here with the brush cutter and I've cut down a lot of flax lily to try and reduce the intensity and the ferocity of the fire that can come up the hill. And I've effectively sheet mulched my next door neighbour's place. You see all the green grass coming up through the mulch. From my point of view, that gives me less of a bushfire problem. From his point of view, the greenie is rebuilding his topsoil, giving him the ability to grow more grass and feed more sheep and cows. So it's a bit of a win from both sides. Not often that it's a good idea to mow your neighbour's lawn, but in this case it is. Because look what's in the area that I have not been mowing. So, as you can see, I'm standing in the middle of a natural clearing, because it was a broken rock dome with not enough topsoil to grow anything. But can you imagine being up here on top of the hill if there's a fire coming up the hill? If somebody throws a bloody cigarette butt out the window on the neighbour's driveway? Could be pretty bad with his level of firewood in the canopy. He's got a lot of it, more of it than I can wood chip. So, not to put too fine a point on it, from a firefighter's point of view, it would be quite a nice thing if there was a fire break between his place and my place. But putting a fire break in this country, can you imagine how much bulldozer time it would take? A lot of money, a lot of work, a lot of fuel, a lot of emissions. Beyond my budget. Therefore, I've been doing what I can with an electric brush cutter, sheet mulching the forest floor, trying to store moisture in the soil so that when the fire comes up that hill behind me, it crosses this patch of rocky ground and it runs into a slightly wetter, slightly moister area. By the way, that's some of the remains of the fence. Here's star pickets that cost me anywhere from $5 to $12 each over the years as the price has been going up. They're going to go back into the new fence because there is going to be a new fence. And although it's a shock to think that I'm going to stand still and watch as an enormous bulldozer comes up this fence line, I've had a couple of wins. On the one hand, technically, the neighbour can go 20 metres for the clearing for the fence, which would mean coming 10 metres into my place. And he's not going to do that. We've agreed that the Radiator-Cap of the bulldozer is going to go up the centreline of the fence. So I'm going to get half a bulldozer blade width worth of clearing on my side, and that means that some of these trees that are not actually dead are going to be sacrificed for the clearing in which the new fence is going to reside. I don't know what it costs in this country, but the average cost of putting a fence in Australia is about $18,000 per kilometre. And me and the neighbour have got about 1.5 kilometres of fence. Not all of it here. You'll notice that there's a lot of fence posts missing. That's because I've been carrying them down and stacking them up at my place to use them for firewood. Might as well get something out of them. Now here we get to the part of my place where I have not been brush cutting because I'm one person, there's so many hours in a day and you can't spend your entire life brush cutting. I haven't burnt this part of it since 2015. And my attitude, considering that at some point I'm going to have to defend this place with, as you can see, plenty of dead trees and plenty of leaves on the ground and plenty of flax lily. The idea of having a clearing that's 5 metres deep on my side and 20 metres deep on my neighbour's side, from a firefighter's point of view, that's actually pretty convenient. From a greenie's point of view, opening up the forest canopy like that is a tragedy. And I will admit, I tried hard to convince my neighbour not to replace the fence, to just keep going with my policy of repairing it. But we came to our agreement on how deep the bulldozer is going to go on which side of the fence and how much I get to contribute to his fence, because he's the bloke who wants the fence. And my contribution is big enough to be interesting when I got to save it up on a pension, but I gave it to him yesterday and it'll help him with the fencing materials. I couldn't afford to put a new fence in, so possibly my entire story on why I don't want a new fence is just rationalisation. Can't afford it, so therefore I'm going to argue against it. But I'm going to get a Firebreak and my neighbour's going to pay for the bulldozer time, and after I agreed to the Firebreak, because that's what it's going to be, that was when we had our drought in autumn and those trees died. And we're going into the biggest, ugliest El Nino that records have ever seen. So I perceive a need for a Firebreak. I think the need for a Firebreak is going to get bigger and uglier the longer the time goes on. There's a hell of a threat from bushfire on that side. My side, well, I can imagine defending it against a fire and I can imagine almost winning, but not up here on top of the hill where I'm a long way away from my water sources and my fire hose won't reach. Up here, the best thing that could happen from a fire prevention point of view is having a clearing. Something to keep the fire on that side from getting to this side. So as sad as it is that I've spent 36 years maintaining the fence, which was 120 years old when I bought responsibility for it, it's going away. It's just, that's where there was a fence post. There's a bit of firewood that I haven't yet carted down to my place. But yeah. And I consider this to be proof positive that everybody who says you should be allowed to graze the national parks and state forests because it'll help with the fire prevention is on the wrong track. Because you know what? Moo cows and bar lambs, they don't eat dead trees. They don't eat sticks, they don't eat leaves. They don't eat dead grass, and they don't eat flax lilies unless they're really starving. What you really need is regular small fires. And of course, what prevents landholders in Australia from conducting a traditional Aboriginal bushfire fuel hazard reduction program is these fences. I have burnt off that fence line in 2015. You can go into my solo hazard reduction burn program playlist and you can see it. It's really difficult to do. You have to put in a hand line underneath the fence, back to bare mineral earth, so you don't burn the fence. And then you have to contain your fire. You're not allowed to let the fire go under a fence, because if the fire goes under the fence, if the wire's been galvanised, you burn the galvanised coating off, and then the fence will go rusty. If it's a high tensile steel fence, you ruin the temper and the wire breaks. And if the fire escapes onto your neighbour's place, the person who lit the fire, whether they had a permit or not, is financially responsible for all the damage their fire does on somebody else's land. So that's all the pasture, all the crops, all the livestock, all the equipment, all the buildings, all the plant. Whatever your fire destroys on somebody else's land, you're responsible for it. So I probably do more hazard reduction burning, particularly in country like this, than most other landholders. But yeah, I'm about to get bulldozer noises coming up this west side of my place and also along the north side of my place. And my adjoining neighbour over here, he's going to get, well, I think he's going to get a new fence. I don't know. See, what he did was he put in a parallel fence on his own land, because his fence with the same next door neighbour I've got was just not holding his livestock in. This fence here, it went in during, I'm going to say the 1970s, perhaps the 1980s. I know the bloke who built it because I know the bloke who did those parallelogram backward stayed fences. Some people you can't explain stuff to. He just didn't understand how triangles work in tension and compression. Plus, if he'd built a traditional fence with a solid wooden stay running from here down to a stone in the ground as an anchor, he only would have sold one stay and one strainer post. Whereas this way, he gets paid to put in 2 strainer posts and a much longer stay. He made a lot of money selling fences like that, and they are now falling down all around the district. And he's sold up and moved away. I think he went to Victoria. But it doesn't matter to him where he lives, because he was born in England before he came here to exercise his sheep farmer fantasy. I know his name, but I won't put it in the YouTube video. I'll contain myself to mentioning his nickname, which is Turkey Neck. Turkey Neck, the fencing contractor. So, yeah, it's going to be an interesting time. I don't know how many possums are going to be dehoused when the bulldozer comes up along the fence line. I'm hoping that no chuffs will be frightened into going away. I'm hoping the swamp wallabies and the kangaroos will forgive me for not lying down in front of the bulldozer and trying to prevent changes to their environment. Because on balance, I think if I get a 30 metre wide Firebreak, or 25 metres, 5 metres on my side and 20 metres on my neighbour's side, that'll make it easier for me to defend this side, where, yeah, my 36 years of tenure has, to some degree, enabled the topsoil to rise up and cover over the rocks, while the biomass and the biodiversity was increasing until 2015, when the southern meridional overturning circulation current around Antarctica stopped and reversed, and our fire behaviour went absolutely crackers and crazy. The current project is just brush cutting. Try and reduce the intensity of the fire that can come out of the forest and head towards my daughter's place and my place. And I'd suggest that you fix in your mind's eye what this part of my place looks like, so when we get back down closer to my hut, you can see that, as scary as it is, it's not as bloody scary as this. This is where I haven't done any fire reduction work since 2015, when I burnt this part of it. That bit up over there, never actually burnt that. One little segment up against the fence in the corner. This part here, I've burnt a lot of it. But 10 years is 10 years, and this has had 11 since it was last burnt. Therefore I've been brush cutting. I'll leave the camera going so you can see how much ground fuel there is up here. And over there you can see the results of last week's brush cutting in terms of a clearing made out of blady grass laid down on the ground. But this stuff would go off like a bomb. You've got very thin, fully dried, fully cured fuel with air on all sides of it. Once again, my theory is if I can cut it down and lie it down, on the one hand it soaks up dew and the bottom side retains a bit of moisture, while it shades the soil and keeps the soil a bit moist. So any trees or shrubs are less likely to die, or at least they might stay alive for longer. And this is what you can do with an electric brush cutter. Cut it down, lay it down, while selectively going around the wild native food plants for humans. Although, as I was explaining to the neighbour, I haven't seen a berry on those for 25 years. I've eaten berries off those plants, but we don't get the snow, and the solitary native Australian bees that used to pollinate them don't live here anymore. That little plant there might be 25 or 30 years old, and it's just hanging on. Most of them are just hanging on, hoping against hope that something will happen to the weather. Maybe Trumpy will nuke the northern hemisphere and we'll get a nuclear winter. And we'll get snow again. And maybe the necessary insects will come back from somewhere. But yeah, that's my current pastime. When I've got nothing else to do, I come up here with the brush cutter and put in a battery and some string. It's an ongoing process. As you can see, I did build a new pile of sticks removed from my clearing. But I haven't got around to lighting it up and burning it because there's a fair bit of work in making the clearing around the stick pile. When that goes off, it'll put up a 60-metre tall pillar of flame. So you want to have a fair bit of rain to saturate the ground around it. Haven't done anything to the bushfire bunker, but it remains a 5-foot deep hole in the ground with a ramp leading into it. And the new shed. Good place for my daughter to camp. The official theory, the one which I admit to publicly, is that I plan to fight fire until the water runs out, and when the water runs out I'll probably die of a heart attack while running to get into the hole in the ground where the bushfire bunker has not yet been built. I know a lot of people reckon that someone like me should evacuate, but the problem is there's nowhere on planet Earth where it's possible to hide from global warming. So you get a choice. You can be a homeless refugee anywhere on Earth, or you can stay and defend somewhere that you belong to. And I like to think that 36 years of living here and doing what I can in the location where my father's father used to bring my big brother to collect charcoal for the blacksmith forge during and after World War II, I probably belong here doing what I can. As you can see, there's now a 1¼ inch poly pipe running from my firefighting water pump to my daughter's place, so I can take sprinklers and a hose up there. And now we're getting into the country which I bought the wood chipper for, to get rid of things like that. The country where I've been burning more often. I burnt this here in 2022, and I've been brush cutting fairly rigorously. So compared to what's up there, this here is actually quite feasible as a defensive proposition. You can see there's pre-positioned tripods to put the sprinkler heads on the upwind side of the high sprinklers. There's one on top of the shipping container to protect the tent that nobody lives in anymore. And the shipping container's sprinkler, its dome intersects or overlaps with the dome thrown out by the sprinkler on top of the tower of light and shower in the middle of the clearing. So maybe I'm wrong, but I think you look at how green this place is compared to what it's like outside my defended area. This isn't too bad. It's not great, but it's arguably a lot better than being in a town or a suburb when a fire comes out of the hinterland and hits the rural-urban interface and goes roaring down through the housing subdivisions. And all they've got is a garden hose connected to an electric water pump at the town's water supply. I've got 35,000 litres of water and 3 fire pumps. So, change is afoot. The times are a-changing. I've now currently got no fences on the north side and the west side, but there's no livestock in those paddocks at the moment, and there won't be until the new fence goes in. and the fence posts which are bent have been given back to me to use as tripods. So there you go, and now you know. At least the troughs have come back, hey? And hopefully I will be able to save the bit that we live in. And all these leaves on the ground will keep the grass alive by shading their roots. And hopefully the fact that the trees have kept some green leaves while shutting the water off to others, and how the tree decides to do that, it's a mechanism I have no idea about. There are still some green leaves on that pair of trees, but I don't know how they're going to go. And in theory, these flax lilies, because they're lying down, they'll be less of a fire hazard than if they were standing up. This is a flax lily which I cut down probably 3 years ago. And if you cut them down, every time they grow up to be dry and brown, then what comes back up is green, vital, alive, full of water, and therefore it's less likely to burn. It becomes something of a firebreak. But it's a very complicated multifactorial equation. Feel sad that a bunch of trees that have been doing their very best to stay alive are going to get bulldozed, or feel very glad that very soon, probably pretty big bulldozer, so its stick rake's probably going to come out to about here, and all that stuff along there is going to get knocked down. And because he's the one that wants the fence, my neighbours agreed to the idea that the trees that get knocked down are going to be pushed over and heaped up on his side. So he's not going to increase my fuel burden. He's going to get the fence that he wants, and he's not making me pay for half of it, which at law he could do. If he was going to be as nasty as he could be, and if I was going to be as nasty as I could be, I could demand that he stop his bulldozer right here on the fence line, because you can't take your bulldozer on your neighbour's land without consent. I could tell him to clear 30 metres wide on his side and put his fence up the middle of it. And then there would be the grounds for an on-lasting grudge between the pair of us. This way, I feel like I'm getting a win because I get a firebreak. I feel like I get a win because it's only going to come about 5 metres deep onto my side. I feel like I get a win because I haven't had to contribute 50% of the cost of the exercise. And he sort of feels like he's got a bit of a win because the greenie has paid for some of the fence and allowed it to happen, and not been as obstructionist as it's possible for a greenie to be. But yeah, when I first came here, there was no difference between that side of the fence and that side of the fence. Those bare open rocks come all the way out to that dead tree that I have been using for firewood. And that's a piece of packaging that's leaked out from my daughter's project. I should pick it up and take it away and throw it at the dump, but I haven't got around to it yet. Different people have different ideas, of course, but my attitude is I cannot make a new tree. So I'm very, very, very unwilling to cut down a living tree. But so many of these trees that I was arguing in favour of leaving alone have died since I lost that argument anyway. But, you know, it's going to be sad for these two. Really is sad for them, because they've struggled and they've struggled and they've struggled and they've managed to maintain a skerrick of life. But the long and the short of it is it's going to get hotter, it's going to get drier. In 30 years' time, for about a month or 6 weeks every summer, it's going to be too hot to be able to maintain life in the middle of the day, because the wet bulb temperature is going to be too high for humans to remain alive. So I'm not going to fight with my neighbour to preserve a tree that's dying. It's easier to just get along with him. But yeah, I've got to say a big worry of mine is the possums. I don't know that a possum lives in that tree, but I would expect one to, although maybe they get out of trees that are completely dead. Maybe they know better than to live in a dead hollow tree. They like living in a living tree that's got a hollow, but yeah, I haven't counted how many trees I'm going to lose. I haven't counted how many trees of my neighbours he's going to cut down or push down. But as I said, it's a complicated equation, but change is afoot. And part of the deal is I get these for firewood. Pretty good firewood too, although that one's still embedded hard enough that I didn't pull it out yesterday. It's getting harder and harder living in the forest. But I reckon I've preserved this side of it as well as I could for as long as I could. And I'm being as graceful as I can about the bulldozer, because it's going to give me a fire break between all that bloody dead, cured, dry firewood and my place. Sometimes you just have to be flexible. And yeah, with the bulldozer's Radiator-Cap going through that fence post, the stick raker is going to definitely take out these two trees, which isn't great, but this is epicormal regrowth, and this tree has already bounced back from about 5 droughts. It hasn't got another bounce back in it, so the next drought was going to finish it off anyway. Same with this one. I grew up believing that eucalyptus trees could recover from fire and just keep regenerating time after time after time, but I don't think that's right. I think they've really only got about 5 regenerations in them. So it's now going to be down to how bad the drought is next time. There you go. Bit of a undirected, aimless stream of consciousness sort of a video. But that's what life's been like up here for a while. Oh, here's something worth showing to you. Look at that. They call these burls, B-U-R-L-S. And I think they're the scars left by gall wasps. And the plan is to take this into town and find the men's shed, where they have a whole bunch of woodworkers and they have a lathe. And the people who do woodwork on lathes, they absolutely love those things. Basically they cut them off flush with the tree and mount that flush face on the faceplate of their lathe, and then they turn a bowl out of it. And they get all sorts of complicated decorative patterns out of the bowl. So not only did I get some firewood out of that tree, but some woodworkers are going to get some fun playing with it on their lathe. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. How's your El Nino drought going as we proceed into the Trumpocalypse? Hopefully your prospects are as manageable as mine, or better. Hopefully you've at least got a fire hose collection. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Ciao. Chuff, chuff, chuff. Chuff, chuff, chuff. Chuff, chuff, chuff. Chuff, chuff, chuff. I do love having chuffs. And I think they've got a nest, because this morning I did see 5 of them, but I'm normally seeing them getting around in mobs of 4, so one of them might be sitting on an egg. And hopefully it won't be in a nest in a tree that's going to get bulldozed, but I don't know where the nest is, so I can't say much about that. And hopefully the noise of the bulldozer and the disturbance in the canopy won't cause them to run away and live somewhere else for another 2 or 3 years. Like they did when the slab for the shed went in. You've got your very own little biscuit, eh? Why that biscuit needed to be carried over there to be played with, I have no idea. But obviously it was a priority. Not for these two, and not for that one either. They really are more fun than a barrel of monkeys. Ciao.